When you're first starting out in the competitive singles tournament scene, deciding what teams to use in your tournament games can be difficult. Even the highest level players struggle with their team selection. Feeling lost about what teams to choose is something I've experienced myself. But the more I've played, the more I've gotten used to this aspect of the game. And in this video, I'm going to try and give you some rules of thumb to follow when preparing for tournaments and deciding on what teams you should use that will hopefully make it feel a little bit less daunting. This video topic was requested by Bergenser, a tier 3 patron. Thank you for the support. If you would like to request a video topic for me to cover, check out my Patreon link in the description for more information. First, I'll give you a quick overview of how to see what tournaments you can sign up for and how to do that. On Pokemon Showdown, there's a tournament section you can go to, and underneath open signups, you can see all the tournaments that are still taking new signups right now on the Smogon forums. At the moment, we've got Gen 9 Monotype, for example. We can click that and then go to the signups thread here. You need to make an account on the Smogon forums and then simply respond to the sign up thread with the word in, and there you go, you've signed up. Once the tournament starts, you'll be tagged in the tournament thread and receive a notification. All the rules will be explained in the post, and there'll be a deadline. You have to play your set before the deadline. Usually it's a best of 3 set unless it says otherwise. Find your name in the post to see who you're paired with. Go to their profile and schedule a time. Let them know that you're paired for the tournament and other info like your time zone and when you're available. Now enough of that boring stuff, let's get into the actual gaming part. Now unlike VGC where your team is locked in for the entire tournament when you sign up, in singles, you have the freedom to change your team each game. That means that when preparing for a best of 3 set, you should probably have at least 3 teams ready to use for the set. A lot of the time, your opponent will not be a super experienced, well-known player. You'll have no idea what their Showdown username is, and you won't have any of their replays or information about teams they use. In these situations, you're completely in the dark when it comes to choosing a team. So the rule of thumb here is to choose something that has solid overall matchups and that you are personally comfortable with. The best thing you can do to prepare for sets like this is to just practice as much as you can with a couple of teams and become as familiar with them as you can. If you want to go really try-hard mode, you can write some notes to help you out and reinforce some of your game plans. Let me use this Gen 3OU team as an example. This is one of my teams, a spike stacking team that aims to apply pressure to common defensive cores using Charizard and Gengar. No team is perfect, and this team can struggle a little bit against the bulky water type Melodic, who is a really big counter to Charizard. Some notes I could make for this team leading up to a tournament might involve the Melodic matchup. Blissey has Thunderbolt on this team, which can do good damage to Melodic and force it to recover repeatedly and eventually paralyze or critical hit Melodic. However, Melodic does have Toxic, which can force out Blissey and cause it to lose this 1v1. But Skarmory and Gengar are Pokemon on the team that can pivot in against Toxic because of their immunity. Skarmory can make spikes and shrug off Surf decently, which will pressure the incoming Melodic in the future. Gengar can threaten a big Thunderbolt or even Explosion against Melodic. Although Melodic can be a bad matchup for the team, the combination of Permanent Sandstorm, Spikes, and these electric type moves can apply enough pressure to Melodic to get through it. It can be a bit awkward, but it is manageable. Sometimes the game plan a team may have against a specific Pokemon isn't super straightforward, and in the moment you can mess things up and forget what to do. Making notes can help reinforce these game plans in your mind and even give you something to refer to if you're feeling stuck in the middle of a battle. Being comfortable with a team is the most important thing. Tournaments are a higher stakes environment, and it's easy to get nervous. And when that happens, you can feel lost and start making mistakes. Comfort and experience with a team will help a lot to offset the nerves. Another good thing to do is to get second opinions and practice against friends or fellow tournament players. You can reach out to people on places like Discord for advice or practice, and my own Discord is a nice place to do this. I've got a team building channel in there, and channels for specific metagames where you can ask for advice or practice games. Second opinions are always very valuable. Sometimes you may feel completely comfortable with a team and it could be doing well for you in your experience, but you overlook one big flaw that ends up costing you a game. A fresh set of eyes can help iron out small errors or point out bad matchups that you didn't notice and steer you in the right direction. So that would be my first piece of advice. Have at least 3 teams you're comfortable with that you could use in a tournament without any info on the opponent and still feel relatively confident. Make notes if you want, figure out your game plans, and get second opinions. Now there's the next level of tournament preparation, when you do have information about your opponent. Maybe you've progressed farther than you expected and you're on a good tournament run, and now you've matched up against somebody with some experience. This is where some pitfalls start to open up and you can start to overthink and over-prepare. Believe me, I've done this myself. If you progress further into a tournament, you're probably going to have to play on the Smogtour's alternate Pokemon Showdown server. This is a server used for tournaments where there's less players and it's less prone to things like server resets and disconnects. And notably, all of the replays of games played on this server are completely public. So, if your opponent has tournament experience, they'll have public replays that they've played on the Smogtour server that you can look at to get info about their teams. And the enemy can see your teams as well if you've played games on the Smogtour server. You can use something called a replay scouter to get a more detailed rundown of what your opponent has used in their public replays, and I'll link this in the description. Just put their showdown name in here and the format you're playing, and there it is, all of the publicly available info about your opponent. Now this may seem like cheating to some people or a little bit lame, but this is public info that you could theoretically access in a much slower way by just searching through all their replays manually. Once you use a team in a Smogtours game, that team is now public whether you like it or not, and this is by design so that people know what you're using. How can you use this information to your advantage? When you have this info about your opponent, it's easy to take it at face value. At times, the replay scouter has hurt me more than it's helped me. I've made the mistake of assuming that a player won't use a certain Pokemon just because they haven't used it in any of their public replays. Or, I've made teams attempting to prepare for specific Pokemon that my opponent uses frequently, only to have them use something else, and now my whole game plan doesn't work. Just because you have this info on your opponent doesn't mean you should go completely all in on countering them and take huge risk going into your games against them. This data is useful, but don't take it as this foolproof information about what they can and can't use. Your opponent is a competitor too, and they're going to be preparing for you as well. They might try to be unpredictable or catch you off guard. You should try and use this information to identify if your opponent has any styles they gravitate towards or habits you can exploit. But don't make your team a matchup fish that completely fails if they don't bring something specific. For example, maybe I have a Gen 3 OU opponent and they love bringing Magneton. Magneton is a Pokemon that can trap and eliminate Skarmory, one of the most common Pokemon in Gen 3 OU. Knowing this, I could bring a spike setter like Smeargle instead of Skarmory. While Skarmory is a more sturdy spike setter that's generally better, it can stick around for a long time and also act as a great defensive wall. If my opponent uses a lot of Magneton, bringing a team that relies on Skarmory's longevity is a big risk. Smeargle is an aggressive spike setter that can use Spore to put something to sleep, set spikes, and use Explosion to sacrifice itself and get your offensive game plan moving as fast as possible. Bringing a Smeargle would make their Magneton less useful and disrupt a core part of their common strategy, which is to target Skarmory teams. But even if they don't bring Magneton, a Smeargle team can still function. Smeargle isn't necessarily an anti-Magneton Pokemon. This team choice is just a precautionary measure against something that the opponent commonly uses. An example of a bad thing to do would be to bring a YOLO Skarmory. This is a Skarmory set with speed and attack investment that uses Hidden Power Ground to eliminate Magneton. Although this set does give Skarmory the ability to eliminate its biggest counter, to be able to do this you have to invest fully into attack and speed instead of the usual HP and special defense, making you far less effective overall. You also have to sacrifice an important move slot on Hidden Power Ground, which is a pretty useless move except against Magneton. Even if you do eliminate Magneton, this weaker Skarmory without any bulk can still be easily broken through, and if you don't match up against Magneton and don't bait it, you're left with this bad Skarmory that won't be able to take common hits and will be worn down and broken through even more easily. One of these team choices is taking your opponent's habits into account while not being completely all in on countering those habits. The other team choice is a much riskier one that may catch your opponent off guard and work, but if you don't get the matchup you want and your opponent doesn't fall for the bait, it could be an absolute disaster. It's a much riskier choice. Another thing to note is that there's nothing wrong with bringing comfort picks or previously built teams in these matches, even though it is fine as well to prepare a specific team for your opponent, and that can be very advantageous. Sometimes, a team you already have will work just fine and be a good choice against them, even factoring in the info you have on them. And of course, comfort and experience with a team that you've used a lot will sometimes be more successful than using something you've only recently built just for your upcoming opponent. You should make these decisions on a case-by-case basis and do what feels right to you. The other side to this coin is to put yourself in the opponent's shoes. They're preparing for you too, so you should take a look at things from their perspective and put your own name in the replay scouter. Take a look at what replays of yours are publicly visible and what they might be expecting you to bring. Sometimes the best thing to do is not to try to counter them, but to try to bring something that they aren't expecting and throw off their preparation. If you have no public replays of you using a certain Pokemon or team style, randomly using that team style can throw off your opponent and give you a big advantage. Be careful when doing this though. Don't bring a team style you aren't comfortable with or a team that you haven't practiced very much, just for the sake of unpredictability. You may end up getting a good matchup and throwing off their preparation, but if you don't know how to pilot the team and play poorly, you could still lose. Public replays, of course, aren't always perfect displays of your team repertoire. You could have a team you've been building and testing on ladder, and in private, that you haven't yet debuted in tournaments and isn't public. A team that you're experienced with, but that your opponent doesn't know about yet, is a perfect team choice. It's always good in general to be practicing with styles you aren't as comfortable with outside of tournaments to expand your knowledge of whatever format you're playing and step outside of your comfort zone. If you end up liking one of the teams and feel confident using it, that becomes a great team choice. It'll be unexpected and you'll know what you're doing. So that's my simple advice for tournament preparation. Hopefully this was useful to some newer players dipping their toes into tournaments for the first time. The examples I used were mostly from Gen 3 OU, because that's my most played tournament format, but this stuff should apply universally to any format. Of course, don't take what I'm saying as the law or anything. The more you play, the more you're going to develop your own style and make decisions for yourself. This will hopefully just give you a good baseline to start with and make tournaments feel a little bit less daunting. The biggest thing is to find a balance between understanding your opponent with the info available, but not going too hard on trying to counter team them, and also just going with your gut sometimes. Thank you again to Bergenser for suggesting this video topic, and to the rest of the patrons. If you'd like to suggest a Pokemon related video topic just like this one, you can become a tier 3 patron. My Patreon link is in the description down below. Thank you for watching. Like this video and subscribe to the channel for more informative content about competitive Pokemon.
The money got different, cause of what I'm spending. The money got different,
oh, it's
cause of what
Megaphone!
I'm spending.
Whoa,
The money
KO'd
got
by one
different,
hit! It's
cause
scattered
of what I'm
spikes!
spending. The money got different.